Ladies and gentlemen, vulnerability is often misunderstood. We are taught from a young age to associate vulnerability with weakness. We hear phrases like, "Don't let them see you cry," or "Stay strong," as though revealing our true emotions somehow makes us fragile. But the truth is that vulnerability is not weakness. It's one of the most courageous acts a human being can undertake. When we talk about building resilience for life's challenges, we cannot skip over vulnerability because it is the foundation of resilience itself. Think about a time when you faced something truly difficult. Maybe it was the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, a career failure, or a moment where you questioned your worth. In those moments, what was the hardest thing to do? Often, it's admitting that you're struggling, letting others see you in your pain, or even confronting your emotions head on. These are vulnerable acts, and they require more courage than most of us give them credit for. Why is vulnerability so difficult? One reason is that we live in a world that prizes certainty and control. To be vulnerable, however, is to let go of those illusions. It's stepping into uncertainty and admitting, I don't have all the answers right now, or I'm not okay, but I'm working on it. This requires immense bravery because it invites the possibility of judgment, rejection, or even failure. But vulnerability also opens the door to something far more important: growth. In life, we will encounter challenges that force us to face our limits. The instinct might be to armor up, to hide behind a facade of strength, dismiss the pain, or convince ourselves and others that we have it all together. But resilience isn't about building walls, it's about tearing them down. When we embrace vulnerability, we allow ourselves to process our emotions fully. We give ourselves permission to grieve, to feel anger, to confront fear, and to sit in discomfort. It's in these raw moments that resilience begins to take root. Take relationships, for example. Whether it's a friendship, a romantic partnership, or a family bond, all meaningful connections require vulnerability. Imagine trying to build a strong relationship without ever admitting when you're hurt, without expressing your fears, or without showing the parts of yourself that you worry might be too messy or imperfect. It wouldn't work, because connection is built on authenticity, and authenticity requires vulnerability. Resilient relationships are not those without conflict, they are those where both people are willing to be open, even when it's hard. Vulnerability doesn't just strengthen relationships, it also strengthens our relationship with ourselves. When we avoid vulnerability, we often end up avoiding our emotions altogether. We push them down, distract ourselves, or numb them in an attempt to maintain control. But those emotions don't go away, they fester. They become the source of anxiety, burnout, and a sense of disconnection from our own lives. Embracing vulnerability means being honest with ourselves about what we're feeling and why. It's saying, I'm afraid, or I'm struggling, without judgment or shame. This self-awareness is the cornerstone of resilience because it allows us to address what we're truly experiencing rather than running from it. For many of us, the idea of embracing vulnerability is terrifying. It can feel like standing in front of an audience completely exposed, with every flaw on display. But what we often forget is that everyone else in that audience has their own vulnerabilities too. When we are brave enough to show up as we are, we create space for others to do the same. Vulnerability, far from isolating us, actually fosters connection. And connection is one of the most powerful sources of resilience we have. Think about the people in your life who inspire you. Chances are they aren't people who appear perfect or invincible. They are people who have faced challenges, acknowledged their struggles, and come out stronger on the other side. Their strength lies not in their ability to avoid hardship, but in their willingness to face it with honesty and openness. They have embraced vulnerability, and in doing so, they have become resilient. One of the greatest lessons we can learn is that vulnerability is not the enemy, it is the path. When we reject vulnerability, we also reject the opportunity to learn, to heal, and to grow. Embracing it, on the other hand, allows us to discover depths of courage and strength we didn't know we had. It allows us to recover from setbacks and continue forward with a greater sense of purpose and connection. Courage is one of the most admired human traits. We see it in stories of great leaders, everyday heroes, and those who stand up for what they believe in, even when the odds are stacked against them. But courage isn't just something we witness from a distance, it's something we experience personally, and perhaps more importantly, something we share. Courage is not a solo act, it's a ripple that spreads outward, inspiring others to take brave steps of their own. The idea that courage is contagious is rooted in the way humans are wired. As social beings, we take cues from each other. When we see someone display courage, whether in the face of adversity, during a difficult conversation, or simply by being authentic, it sparks something in us. It's a reminder that bravery isn't about being fearless, it's about acting despite the fear. This realization can give others permission to confront their own fears and step into their own courage. Think about a moment in your life when someone else's bravery influenced you. Perhaps you saw a friend speak up in a room where everyone else was silent, and it emboldened you to share your own truth. Maybe you watched someone tackle a challenge they were terrified of, and it gave you the push to face your own. Courage has a way of creating momentum. When one person takes a brave step, it signals to others that they, too, are capable of bravery. Courage doesn't always look the way we think it will. It's not just grand gestures or acts of heroism. Often, courage is quiet. It's found in the person who dares to say, "I need help," or "I don't know the answer." It's in the parent who apologizes to their child, showing them that accountability is a strength, not a weakness. It's in the student who raises their hand to ask a question, even though they fear looking foolish. These moments may seem small, but they have a profound impact, not only on the person showing courage, but on everyone who witnesses it. There's a reason courage is contagious. It breaks down barriers. Fear thrives in isolation. It tells us that we're alone in our struggles, that no one else feels the way we do, or that stepping forward will lead to rejection. But when someone demonstrates courage, they shatter that illusion. They show us that it's okay to take risks, to be imperfect, and to be seen. Their bravery becomes a beacon, illuminating a path forward, not just for themselves, but for others. For example, consider someone who opens up about a personal struggle such as mental health. In doing so, they break the silence that often surrounds these topics. Their courage gives others permission to say, "Me too," or "I've been there." It creates a sense of shared humanity where vulnerability is met with understanding instead of judgment. That initial act of bravery doesn't just help the person who speaks out, it empowers others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of connection and support. Courage can also be contagious in leadership. A leader who admits their mistakes, takes responsibility, and models ethical behavior sets the tone for their team. Their actions signal that it's safe to take risks, ask for help, and challenge the status quo. In contrast, a leader who avoids vulnerability fosters a culture of fear where people hesitate to speak up or try new ideas. The difference is striking. When courage is present, it inspires trust and innovation. Another powerful way courage spreads is through storytelling. When we hear stories of people overcoming obstacles, standing up for their values, or facing their fears, it stirs something deep within us. We may not be in the same situation, but their story reminds us that courage is possible and that it's worth the effort. That's why stories of resilience and bravery resonate so strongly across cultures and generations. They remind us of our shared capacity for courage. However, the contagious nature of courage doesn't mean it's easy. It often takes just one person to break the silence, take the first step, or say the hard thing, and that person may feel exposed or vulnerable in the process. But their bravery makes it easier for others to follow. Think of the way applause spreads in a crowded room. It begins with a single person, then another joins in, and soon the room is filled with the sound of people clapping together. Courage works the same way. It's important to remember that courage is not the absence of fear. In fact, fear is often a companion to courage. The difference lies in how we respond to that fear. Do we let it paralyze us, or do we take action in spite of it? When one person takes that brave step, they show others that fear doesn't have to hold them back. This creates a powerful cycle. As one person's courage inspires another, the collective strength of a community grows. Even small acts of courage can have a profound impact. Imagine a child standing up to a bully in a classroom. Their action not only stops the immediate harm, but also sends a message to their peers that bullying isn't acceptable. It gives others the confidence to stand up in the future, knowing they're not alone. This kind of bravery may start with one person, but its effects ripple outward, creating a culture of courage and accountability. Failure is an unavoidable part of life. No matter how carefully we plan or how much effort we put into avoiding mistakes, failure will eventually find us. And yet, our cultural narratives around failure often make it feel like an endpoint, a sign that we've reached the limit of our abilities or that we're not cut out for success. But what if we flip the script? What if we saw failure not as the end, but as the beginning? Failing forward means doing exactly that, using failure as a stepping stone, a source of growth, and a guide for future success. The truth is, failure isn't inherently bad. It's uncomfortable, yes, and often disappointing, but it's also one of life's greatest teachers. Many of the most transformative lessons come not from getting things right, but from getting them wrong. When we fail, we're given a chance to reflect, to ask what went wrong and why. This process of reflection is where growth begins. Instead of letting failure define us, we can let it refine us. This mindset shift from seeing failure as a dead end to seeing it as a detour changes everything. One of the most important aspects of failing forward is recognizing that failure is evidence of effort. It means you tried something that stretched you, something outside your comfort zone. If you never fail, it's likely because you're playing it too safe. Growth happens at the edges of our abilities, in that uncomfortable space where mistakes are inevitable. Failing forward means embracing this discomfort as a necessary part of progress. Take innovation, for example. Almost every major breakthrough in science, technology, or art was preceded by failure. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work," when discussing his process of inventing the light bulb. Each failed attempt wasn't a step backward, it was a step forward, bringing him closer to success. This mindset is what distinguishes those who achieve great things. They see failure not as a barrier, but as a building block. But failing forward isn't just about persistence, it's about perspective. When failure happens, it's natural to feel frustration or even shame. We might ask ourselves, why did this happen to me, or what does this say about my abilities? These are backward-looking questions that keep us stuck in the failure itself. Failing forward requires us to ask different questions. What can I learn from this, and how can I do better next time? These forward-looking questions shift our focus from what went wrong to how we can make it right. Failure also teaches us resilience. Each time we stumble and get back up, we strengthen our ability to navigate life's challenges. Resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, it's about facing it head-on and coming out stronger. In fact, failure can act as a kind of training ground for resilience. The more we practice failing forward, extracting lessons, adjusting our approach, and trying again, the more equipped we become to handle future setbacks. Of course, failing forward doesn't mean ignoring the emotional impact of failure. It's okay to feel disappointed or frustrated when things don't go as planned. These feelings are valid and part of the process. The key is not to dwell in them indefinitely. Acknowledge the pain, give yourself grace, and then shift your focus to what comes next. Failing forward requires us to balance self-compassion with accountability. It's not about brushing off mistakes, but about taking ownership of them in a constructive way. One common fear that holds people back from failing forward is the fear of judgment. We worry about what others will think if we fall short. This fear can be paralyzing, causing us to avoid risks altogether. But the reality is, most people aren't as focused on our failures as we think they are. And even if they are, their opinions don't define us. What truly matters is how we respond to failure, how we use it to grow and move forward. Failing forward also requires a willingness to let go of perfectionism. Perfectionism is the enemy of progress. It convinces us that anything less than flawless success is unacceptable, which only sets us up for disappointment. When we hold ourselves to impossible standards, failure feels catastrophic. But when we approach life with a mindset of curiosity and experimentation, failure becomes an expected and valuable part of the process. It's not a reflection of our worth, it's simply a step on the journey. There's also a communal aspect to failing forward. When we share our failures openly, we give others permission to do the same. Too often, failure is shrouded in secrecy, as though admitting it would somehow diminish us. But in reality, sharing our failures can be a powerful act of connection. It reminds us and others that we're not alone, that failure is a universal experience. This shared understanding creates an environment where growth is possible, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. Failing forward also prepares us for success in ways we might not expect. Success that comes too easily can make us complacent. But success that comes after failure is deeply earned. It's grounded in hard work, self-awareness, and resilience. This kind of success isn't fleeting, it's sustainable because it's built on a foundation of lessons learned and challenges overcome. Finally, failing forward teaches us to embrace the journey rather than fixating solely on the destination. Life is full of twists and turns, and our greatest growth often comes from the paths we didn't plan to take. When we fail, we're given an opportunity to reevaluate our goals, refine our strategies, and discover strengths we didn't know we had. These moments of recalibration are where true progress happens. In a world obsessed with achievement, we are often taught that perfection is the goal. The perfect job, the perfect home, the perfect relationship, the perfect version of ourselves, these ideals loom large in our minds and dictate much of how we live. But this pursuit of perfection comes at a cost. It can make us feel isolated, disconnected, and exhausted. The truth is, perfection is an illusion, and the more we chase it, the further we drift from what truly matters: connection. Human beings are wired for connection. It's in our DNA. We thrive in relationships where we feel seen, heard, and valued, not for some polished, idealized version of ourselves, but for who we truly are. Yet so many of us hesitate to show our authentic selves because we're afraid we won't measure up. We think that if we can just be perfect enough, we'll earn acceptance and love. But the paradox is that true connection doesn't come from perfection, it comes from vulnerability. Vulnerability is the willingness to show up as you are, imperfections and all. It's admitting that you don't have all the answers, that you've made mistakes, or that you're struggling. This openness is what fosters connection. When we allow others to see us in our messy, unpolished state, we create space for them to do the same. It's a powerful reminder that we're all human, that we're all navigating challenges, and that none of us has it all figured out. Consider the difference between someone who presents themselves as perfect and someone who is willing to be real. The person chasing perfection might seem impressive on the surface, but their walls make it hard to truly connect with them. On the other hand, the person who is open about their struggles or flaws feels approachable, relatable, and authentic. We're drawn to authenticity because it reflects our own experiences. It reminds us that we're not alone in our imperfections. The problem with perfectionism is that it's inherently isolating. When we strive to appear perfect, we create a facade that separates us from others. We worry about being judged, so we hide our true selves. But in doing so, we rob ourselves of the very thing we crave: connection. Relationships built on perfection are fragile because they lack depth. They rely on maintaining appearances rather than fostering understanding. In contrast, relationships built on authenticity are resilient because they're rooted in trust and acceptance. One of the biggest barriers to connection is the fear of being judged. We fear that if we let others see our flaws, they'll think less of us. But here's the irony: when we pretend to be perfect, we often come across as less relatable. Perfection creates distance, while vulnerability builds bridges. When we share our struggles, we give others permission to do the same. This mutual openness creates a foundation for meaningful connection. Think about a time when someone confided in you about a challenge they were facing. How did it make you feel? Chances are it didn't make you think less of them. Instead, it probably deepened your respect and empathy for them. Their willingness to be vulnerable created a bond, a sense of shared humanity. This is the power of connection over perfection. It brings people closer and fosters understanding. In many ways, perfectionism is a defense mechanism. We use it to shield ourselves from criticism or rejection, but in trying to protect ourselves, we inadvertently shut people out. Perfectionism says, I can't let you see the real me because you might not like what you see. Connection says, here I am, flaws and all, and I trust that you'll accept me anyway. Choosing connection over perfection requires courage because it means letting go of control. It means taking the risk of being seen. This shift in mindset isn't easy, especially in a culture that rewards perfection. Social media, for example, often paints an unrealistic picture of life. We see carefully curated images and highlight reels that make us feel like everyone else has it together. It's tempting to play along, to only show the polished parts of our lives, but this only perpetuates the cycle of perfectionism and disconnection. When we choose to share our real selves instead, we break the cycle. We show others that it's okay to be imperfect, and we invite deeper connection. It's important to note that choosing connection over perfection doesn't mean abandoning self-improvement or striving for excellence. It's not about settling or giving up on goals. Rather, it's about recognizing that our worth isn't tied to our achievements or how perfect we appear. It's about prioritizing relationships over appearances and authenticity over approval. Connection over perfection also applies to how we treat ourselves. Many of us are our own harshest critics. We hold ourselves to impossible standards and berate ourselves when we fall short. This inner perfectionism can make it hard to connect with others because we project the same expectations onto them. When we practice self-compassion, however, we open the door to deeper connection. We become more accepting of our own imperfections and, in turn, more accepting of others. When we let go of perfection, we make space for joy. Connection brings a sense of belonging that perfection never can. It allows us to laugh at our mistakes, celebrate our progress, and find comfort in shared struggles. It reminds us that we don't have to do it all alone and that we're worthy of love and belonging just as we are. Each of us lives within a story. It's the narrative we tell ourselves about who we are, where we've been, and where we're headed. This story shapes our choices, our relationships, and how we respond to life's challenges. But what many of us fail to realize is that these stories are not set in stone. We are the authors of our own lives, and we have the power to name our story and rewrite its ending. Naming your story is the first step. This means identifying the narratives you've been carrying, whether they've been given to you by others or shaped by your own experiences. These narratives often emerge unconsciously, formed by the events of our past, the messages we've internalized, and the meaning we've assigned to what has happened to us. Over time, these stories solidify into beliefs about ourselves, such as, "I'm not good enough, I always mess things up." Or "Success isn't for people like me." These beliefs then become self-fulfilling prophecies, guiding our actions and reinforcing the very patterns we want to break. Naming your story requires reflection and honesty. It means asking yourself, what story am I telling about my life? Is it one of resilience or defeat, abundance or scarcity, empowerment or victimhood? Identifying these narratives can be uncomfortable because it forces us to confront truths we've been avoiding. But it's also liberating because once you've named your story, you can begin to question it. For example, imagine you've been carrying the story, "I'm not creative because I failed art class in school." This narrative might lead you to shy away from creative pursuits, even if you feel a longing to explore them. Naming this story allows you to examine its origin. Was failing art class a definitive verdict on your creativity, or was it simply one teacher's subjective assessment? By naming and interrogating the story, you can begin to loosen its grip on you. Rewriting the ending means taking ownership of your narrative and steering it in a new direction. This doesn't mean erasing the past, it means reframing it. The events that shaped you are part of your story, but they don't have to dictate your future. You get to decide what those events mean and how they'll influence the next chapters of your life. For many of us, the stories we carry are rooted in pain, disappointment, or unmet expectations. Perhaps you were told as a child that you weren't smart enough or that you wouldn't amount to anything. Perhaps you faced rejection or failure that left you questioning your worth. These experiences may have planted seeds of doubt that grew into limiting beliefs. Rewriting the ending involves acknowledging the impact of these experiences while refusing to let them define you. Take the story of someone who grew up in a challenging environment. They might carry the narrative, "I'll never escape where I come from," believing that their circumstances have permanently limited their potential. Rewriting this story doesn't mean denying the hardships they've faced. It means choosing to see those hardships as a source of strength rather than a permanent obstacle. It means reframing the narrative to say, "My past has shaped me, but it doesn't control me. I have the power to create a new future." This process isn't about ignoring reality or pretending everything is fine. It's about reclaiming agency over your life. Too often, we act as though we're passive characters in our own story, waiting for circumstances to change or for someone else to rewrite the script. But we are the authors. Even when we can't control what happens to us, we can control how we respond. We can choose to rewrite our role, shifting from victim to survivor, from observer to active participant. Rewriting the ending also requires letting go of perfectionism. Your story doesn't need to be flawless to be meaningful. In fact, it's often the messiest chapters that hold the most potential for growth. The moments when everything seemed to fall apart are the same moments that force us to find strength we didn't know we had. By embracing these imperfect parts of your story, you can create an ending that is richer and more authentic. A powerful way to rewrite your story is through intentional action. Once you've identified the narrative you want to change, ask yourself, what small steps can I take to align my life with the new story I want to create? If your old story is, I can't take risks because I might fail, rewriting the ending might mean taking one small, manageable risk and proving to yourself that you can handle the outcome. Each step you take reinforces the new narrative and weakens the hold of the old one. Community plays an important role in rewriting our stories. Often the stories we carry are shaped by the people around us, family, friends, teachers, or peers. Surrounding yourself with supportive, encouraging voices can help you see your story in a new light. These connections remind us that we're not alone, that others have faced similar challenges and found a way forward. They can inspire us to envision a new ending and give us the courage to pursue it. The beauty of rewriting your story is that it's an ongoing process. It's not about writing a single perfect ending and sticking to it. Life is dynamic, and so is your story. There will be twists and turns, unexpected detours, and moments when you feel like you're starting over. But each of these moments is an opportunity to revise the narrative and create something even more meaningful. When you name your story and rewrite its ending, you reclaim your power. You move from being defined by your past to shaping your future. You remind yourself that your story is not something that happens to you, it's something you create. Life is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, failures, and growth. As we navigate its twists and turns, the key to resilience lies in how we choose to respond to what life throws our way. Whether it's embracing vulnerability as a source of strength, cultivating courage that inspires others, or finding the lessons in our failures, each moment shapes who we are and who we can become. By prioritizing connection over perfection and daring to rewrite the stories that no longer serve us, we unlock the power to face adversity with grace and determination. Resilience is not about avoiding struggle, it's about finding purpose, meaning, and strength through it. Each of us has the power to rise, to grow, and to write the next chapter of our story with courage and hope.